Dr. Jazz.
And I wanted to start our talk
Dr.
like
Jazz.
first, what's happening with you on the band leading department? I mean, have you been
Oh
preparing
yeah.
something new, or what's the story there?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I had my whole thing was, geez. I mean, I started improvising. I mean, I can go back a little. I got to go give you the context since we have the time.
Please.
Uh, I I wanted to start improvising because I'd had a classical background, and then I encountered Joe Maneri kind of randomly when I was at NEC Conservatory. There was a dean who said, "Oh, well, I think you should check out Joe Maneri." I had been doing classical, and then I wanted to improvise, but I didn't really know what to do. So they just she said, "Well, why don't you go check this guy out?" And he just I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't had that conversation with
Mm.
her. I mean, because Joe Maneri opened everything up. He opened everything up for me. I was going to his class. Matt Moran was in there,
Okay.
and it was really something, and sort of showing, what it could be like to create a very personal, idiosyncratic language and world that you believed in deeply, and that's at the
Mm.
model. And I mean, along the way, you could get lost sometimes in Joe Maneri's style, but really, if you follow his example, and it took a while to get through that.
Mm.
Eventually, following the example, the pattern, which is to kind of um, immerse yourself in all this stuff, and then seek to find your voice out through that.
Mm.
I was at the time, around the time that I was there, and I was like, what are 20, early 20s, I started to kind of have this sense of, I started to see physically like a visual space of a constellation of four different things. And I was imagining a room, like a sculptural thing almost, with these four different elements. And I felt like I needed to make a quartet. And it was really important for me to manifest this. And it was a connection between all the stuff I'd done before. I did these ostinato bass lines that happened a lot in that quartet music.
Yeah.
And it was like, I grew up doing chamber music, Beethoven string quartets and stuff. And so like living inside that kind of intimacy and interdependence and independence and interdependence of voices and all of that, I wanted like to feel that level of nuance, but I wanted it to be in a language that was new and that was personal and meaningful to me. And so it started to take shape that way. And so I started to write these ostinati, and then want to have these layers and want a place for the cello to be able to sing. And then the vibraphone and the trumpet kind of came in. And so it was important for me to manifest this, and it felt like it was about a quartet.
Mm.
And that's what I did. And I had 8 records with that band
Yeah.
of different configurations. And then it's like I did that. And it was really important for me to do that and to bring that forth. And through that time, I was really wrestling with kind of inside and outside, tonal,
Yeah.
not tonal, diatonic, not abstract, like sounds like this. I was working through all these questions at the time. And by the time had done all those records, I really got to a place where I wasn't that much interested in composing for people, and I started really getting much more interested in doing solo things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so a lot of what I'm doing is solo. I work a lot with dancers, and I do some collaborative stuff, but it's not band leading.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't really. Still, I ask myself, maybe once a year, I ask myself something about like, do I want to do like a Daniel Levin thing? And not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
At this
answer.
time, still exploring these other dimensions. So
Yeah.
you know, I was very fortunate to have had labels, particularly Clean Feed, who were supportive of me being able to go through this process um, of developing this music and manifesting it. And it was very important. And I don't know what without doing that, I don't think I'd be where I am now, which is to
Yeah.
sort of have that behind me.
Interesting. Yeah. You mentioned Joe Maneri, and
Yeah.
that you wanted to improvise. Why did you want to go into the world of improvisation? I mean, what did you see? Like, did you hear some music, or like, was there a moment that you said,
Yeah.
like, shit, I don't want to deal with written music
Okay.
anymore?
Okay. It happened in lots of different, like, there are lots of different little stories. The first one that's most memorable is I had my first year of conservatory at Manus College of Music in New York, studying with a great cello teacher who really taught me about freedom from fear
Mm,
of technique. And he was really about the awareness of like what is actually happening here. And he would do this cool stuff where he has he did this concert at an embassy somewhere in New York, and like all of his students came, and he was doing a trill,
hmm
and he looked up at us with this little like mischievous thing, and he switched it to a different fingering with his thumb, and like it was like he was teaching us like to not be afraid of these things around technique. So he was
mm,
amazing. Anyway, I finished that year, but I was not feeling like I was really in that track of doing all that written music. And I went to a festival for it was chamber music and dance down in Florida after that freshman year at Manus. And they said, all right, well, let's bring the divisions together today, dance and music. And then they said, who wants to improvise?
mm.
And so okay, I guess so, yeah. And so there's a dancer and there's me. And I don't know. I only really, looked at music or memorized it. And I never had a stimulus of a dancer
Mm.
as like, what do you play now? And it's, of course, it's the dancer, but it's also you making choices. And so I don't remember a lot of it, but I remember the ending of it. I remember that she was spinning quite fast. And so I thought, oh, it's like Mickey Mouse stuff. So I'm way up top. And then I had this kind of premonition or feeling, okay, she's going to hit the mat. She's going to hit the mat. And I slammed it down on the C string, the very bottom. She hit the mat. It was like, holy shit, what just
Mm.
happened?
Yeah.
I'm not getting this from the page, and I'm watching her, and then I'm thinking about it like what something turned on. Either something turned on from that experience or something was turned on to allow me to do that, like that kind of thing. So there was that. I had other experiences where I would just I stopped going to school. I was a bicycle messenger and I was just practicing and I was starting to think about, I don't know where this came from. I want to be like Bach, who could just improvise a program of music out of himself. That's the kind of musician I want to be.
Mm.
So these were the kind of thoughts and experiences. So then when I got to NEC and they said, okay, go check out Joe Maneri. And he's like, I was ready because he's like, all right, come on in. And he's um, the rapturous, exultant joy of being immediately like so present with your creation in the moment and having it be so important to be so committed to what you're playing right then,
Yeah.
and not be full of shit and not be worried about what someone else thinks and if it's hip or if it's cool, and just to be like taking the utmost risk. It was very, very, very appealing to me, his model. And then I would go to concerts of the quartet and I would just have my mind blown. I would just like, uh,
That was a killing band. Yeah. Yeah.
oh, incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. With
And so
Randy
then
on drums,
I
right?
huh?
With Randy on drums.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, he was glacial. The speed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you
Yeah. I
like
love it.
40 seconds later, and then just you can't even deal with it. It was like, oh, can I even go to a second set? I can't even handle this. It was work. I loved it. And then also yeah, so that kind of those kinds of experiences. And I was able to not just take his class, in his class were all these interesting players. Like Nate McBride was there, was Matt Moran, Greg Sinibaldi, who moved out west, Zach Buell, he was a member of Blue Man Group, but he was a drummer. Like these people were there. It was 3 times a week, and they'd play. Then you'd have a classical person play, and they'd all get the same kind of feedback, which is like, no, make it. Like, let's make it happen really for real. This commitment thing. And yeah, I remember when Greg was there and he was working on trying to get free, and it's hard as a tenor player. I mean, there's so much, it's so heavy, everything. And he played the solo and it transcended. And he was like, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. And it was just that's the kinds of experiences. So that was what was happening. And I was able to then study with him privately. And that's where things got really deep. He became my mentor and we had weekly lessons.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. When did you then move to New York after that?
Well, I had been in New York for Manus because I was in New York.
Yeah, but then you went to
then I was in Boston.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of different here and there kind of stuff. And then after graduating the school, I was living in New Jersey, and then I was in Connecticut. But when I was doing that, I was teaching music in schools, and then it was always at night. I would be in New York to do whatever, and then go back. So that's the first time that I was in New York was sort of living in New Jersey or Connecticut. And then I had a period where I lived in Manhattan for 3 years on the Lower East Side, and then I lived in Brooklyn, and just different times sort of sprinkled throughout. A lot of my time was, because I wasn't able to both like be a band leader and pay for, like, you can't, have the gigs and the guarantees and stuff. Like I couldn't just do that. So I was always grounded in these teaching jobs, which I still do. And I still love to do, actually. And I found after several years that it actually, they're mutually supportive.
Yep. Yeah, I teach as well. I mean, I've been teaching for 25 years, and I love it as well. Yeah. I mean, yeah. No, I'm asking about New York because, like, you became kind of immersed in this creative scene. I checked today the records I have you on, and I have you like on 40 records or something like that. So, with everyone. But if we just go back a little bit, like, how did you played a lot with Joe Morris? I mean, he was in your band, and how did your story with Joe begin also, and having to be able to play with him? He's one of the gurus of improvised music, I guess.
Yeah, I'll say now that I feel just really generally that I was very lucky to be, I was able to hang out with some just super heavyweight people that kind of kicked my ass in lots of ways. I mean, it's kind of an old story, right? But I was fortunate, and Joe Morris was certainly one of them. I was going to a concert at NEC at Brown Hall. It was a trio, Joe, Randy, and Matt. And Joe Morris was there, and I went to the concert, and then I was invited to go out afterwards with them to the Pizzeria Uno across the street. We were hanging out at the restaurant, and we were talking, and Joe said to me, you could, because they had this thing back in, they don't really have it now, but at NEC they used to have a thing where you could kind of like find someone and then set it up for them to be your teacher, even though they weren't on faculty. So I was talking with Joe about this, and we were talking about the idea of him he's like, so I could use a cello player, and I could, so let's talk about this. So I went to try to work that out, and I became Joe's first student at NEC through this way of doing things that they don't have anymore, as far as I know. So I would go out to his house. The lessons weren't generally at the school. I'd go out to his house in Sharon, Mass, and that's how we started. And then I started the band, and he had started around that time, started doing bass, but it was very low on his, like, he wasn't known for that in any way. He was really just guitar. So, but of course, he has so many ideas about what a great bass player ought to do and could do. Because he's thought about it, and he says asked for that and thinks about it. So it was amazing to have him kind of at the rudder, but not be like Joe Morris guitar melody, but be like kind of in the background at the same time, expertly kind of steering things. Incredible. And then a lot of the education with him was we both lived in Connecticut. After I graduated, we were driving down together all the time to New York, back and forth for gigs. So the stories and the discussions were always really important. I was studying with him at NEC, and then a couple things happened. The first thing that happened with playing with the people that I would play with was that I made a recording of Joe Maneri's microtonal piece for flute called Sherafudin Biaya Maneri Makdum ol Mulk, and it's a piece dedicated to a Sufi mystic who wrote a book called 1,000 Letters, and it's flute piece, it's microtonal. I was studying it and really working on this 72-note octave, and really being taken serious. I would do, like, instead of do do do do like thirds, I'd be like working out ladder leapfrog stuff within a half step. I was getting really into it. And then I did a performance in Jordan Hall in Boston at NEC, and it was recorded. And then Matt Maneri heard it, and he gave me a call. He said, I heard the recording of you playing my father's piece, and would you like to play some gigs?
That's how you hooked up with Matt. Okay.
Yeah. And, I'd always loved his playing. And for me, he was setting the example of what you could do with a string instrument. He was it. That was it. That's what I was interested, because I didn't listen to string players except for Matt, because that was what really turned me on, that kind of stuff, like what he could do. So I ended up playing these gigs with him. I was living in New Jersey and playing these gigs with him at the Knitting Factory old office with these crazy people. It was Craig Taborn, Matt Moran, people who sometimes, I think John Lockwood, maybe, I don't remember, but there was Mark Dresser, all these people. And it was George Schiller, Ed Schiller. Anyway, I don't remember it at all, but we would play these gigs, and it was really, really, my first gigs in New York were with that. And then around that time, Joe would visit me sometimes. He visited me in New Jersey where I was living, and then I booked my first gig in New York at CBGB's Lounge.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And convened this band with Joe on bass, and it had Dave Ballou.
Dave, yeah.
Dave Ballou, and then I asked Matt, and we rehearsed our stuff and started playing that, and then that's kind of how that happened. Later, a later thing was trying to hang with Joe on guitar, which was a different thing, very different, because this is Joe Morris guitar, and so. And we had some great experiences. We did some great music. We we did a festival, and we played in Riga, Latvia at that festival.
Yeah.
And we made a record from that. And it's been always really fun to play with him, because, he's.
Yeah. I mean, as a guitarist, for me, he's one of the,
Oh, yeah.
for improvised music, I mean, I did this interview with him, and I told him, like, his solo album, that's like the Bible for.
What the Singularity?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's
Right.
That's up there, it's like shit, So yeah. Amazing.
For sure. No, I love, he's such an amazing, he's dedicated so much care and energy to know the depths of things. And so I'm so glad that he ended up, because after being my teacher, there are other people who were interested, and then he was able to it was like a doorway into NEC for him, and he became part of that. And then he was able to influence so many people and able to help them, because at NEC at the time, without him, it's not a very sophisticated conversation about what improvised music was. It was like, well, you're playing jazz, or you're doing this free shit.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, let's talk about the particulars. Like, well, what's happening in the bass? What's the rhythm? You're doing ornette. Oh, well, you want to do that? This is Cecil Taylor. Oh, here's how this works. Here's how it works. And that rigor is something that really appealed to me. It also appealed to me about Joe Maneri, because he's rigorous. He came from, Alban Berg to Joseph Schmidt to Schoenberg harmony chords. and he's rigorous as you can be, and incredibly free.
Mm-hmm.
And that combination of that is something that I look for situations where I can play with people like that. Tony Malaby is like that. Maneri is like that. These guys are incredibly rigorous, and they're also incredibly free.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How did you open up? I mean, through help of both Joes actually. Like, but I've played many times like with some classical. I wrote music for classical small chamber quartets or stuff like that, and those guys could technically play everything. But then I had like, let's say, an open section, and it was so heavy for them to create something. I mean, I found ways then, but like, how did you open up? Because technically you could play anything, obviously, but just
It
to
was
get the
brutal.
creativity flow going.
It was brutal. It was really, really hard. In fact, because you go through, and you're familiar, but in the classical training, and I think you go through and you play well, and you kind of become, your identity becomes connected with your playing, and that's important. And it's always important, even like later, like your sound is you.
Yeah.
So it gets very complicated when your sound is you, but then you don't have anything that you want to play that sounds like you. And it can be a real problem. And I think a lot of people might start out that way. And personally, not meaning disrespecting, but I think a lot of people like start to try to improvise, and they give up, and they start to just get a loop pedal,
Yeah,
string
sure.
play, and they're like, all right, here's what I'm gonna do, loop. And it's like finding a way to actually get your voice. And I mean, one of the things that happened, this is an ongoing thing, and I would say I'm comfortably in my voice now, but it wasn't that way with my first couple of records. I mean, parts of it, sections, but I can listen and be like, okay, no, I'm trying to break through here. One, I struggled with it. When I was studying with Joe Maneri, I also played the tenor sax when I was a kid. And there was one time I was like, he was like, all right, play an A and a B and a C motive, and then like do this, that with the form. And I'm trying to play it, and I'm like, fuck. Like everything I played was the same.
Yeah.
Because it's all like all the gestures that I had embodied were all like kept coming out. I couldn't stop it. It's all Schubert. I love Schubert. I love Bach. I love Beethoven, but I didn't want to play them all the time. So it was put into my muscle memory. So I was like, let me put this down. And he let me his 1926 Selmer cigar cutter tenor. And we did that for a while. And I just played tenor.
Wow.
And it helped me free up. That was one thing. And
okay.
But after that, I was really struggling with not just like the gesture, but also like what's hip, because I had models of people like Joe Morris, like Matt Maneri, like Joe Maneri, that I was so like intimidated by, that I was having trouble coming up with something of my own. And one thing that Joe Maneri told me, he said, well, both of those Joes told me some important things, but Joe Maneri told me, or he told the class, he was like, listen, think about this. Da da da da da da da da. That's stupid. That's the stupidest, dumbest idea I ever heard. That's what he's saying, right? And it's like, it's like the point is like doesn't have to be hip. It's like play the stupid thing sometimes. Let it just be there, and don't try to make it hip, because then you censor yourself. He didn't say all that, but that's kind of how I took it. And then Joe Morris said something that I wasn't quite able to do at the time, but it was an important bridge. And he said something to me like this. He said, like, well, listen, here I am. I'm Joe Morris. Like, this is who I am in this world of music. And I've done this and that, and if there's someone who could be an authority here, I probably am qualified because of this and this and this. So if you're thinking about you need an authority, I could be that. You have my blessing. Be an artist. Go ahead. He's like, I grant you permission, basically. And that was important. And the next step, of course, was me granting myself permission to just do what the fuck I want and not really worry about whatever anyone else was thinking. But it took a long time. So there was that. a
Mm.
lot of the way that I really worked on it was facing it was through solo playing. And I've did so many solo concerts where I felt like I was trying to break through, trying to break through, trying to break through and failed. And my first solo record, I'm proud of it. But it's also a real struggle, that first
Mm.
record, Inner Landscape.
Yeah.
When you ask me about how did I break through, it's important to tell the story of what I really feel like was my birthday, which was the solo record Living. Because what I was up until that point, I was cheating, I felt, with recording because I was afraid of the studio. And I would go to the studio and try to record, and I would look at the microphone and I'd just say, what's the point? And I would kind of get a lot of my records were like done like live, or I would set up situations that were kind of live. Even with my first solo record, some of the cuts were from the Brecht Forum in New York. The other ones I did in Chicago in this ratty little studio. We had a couch right in front of me. I had the recording engineer invite his friends. No one used deodorant, and I got everyone a case of beer, and they're drinking beer 3 feet from me, and I'm playing for them. And that's how I got it.
Yeah.
And I felt there's something up this, like, why can't I just make my music? Why do I have to have the audience? Like, what is that? I felt like there was some kind of dependence, sort of like if you hear about stories where someone's kid gets trapped under a car and they get adrenaline, they lift the car. I felt like I was always putting myself in that situation to get the music out. I'm like, I need a different thing. I'm not quite there if I'm still doing that. So I started to entertain this idea and imagine, like, what would it be like if I were to hike into a forest 100 miles from a city and pitch a tent and just sleep there by myself and get up the next morning. I come out of the tent, I see some rocks and twigs and leaves, and I just start kind of like, no one can see me, squirrels and birds and stuff. I'm making little sculptures to please myself, little ritual sculptures. Make this, okay, put the little rock there, the leaf. What would happen if I were in that psychological space and I played?
Mm.
For me, for my pleasure, making my little ritual sculptures that had personal meaning to me, because I would find meaning in that. Just as when I was a kid and I would play with Legos by myself, I didn't have an audience. I'm making the shit that I want to make. I want a radar
Exactly.
dish,
Yeah.
a guy on top, some wheels. I don't like it. Fuck it. I'll make another building. No big deal. But I'm committed to the choices, but I'm casual about the outcome. And that's what I realized, that when I was 6, I knew how to improvise because I already did that with Legos. I had to figure out how to just bring that into this cello world. And
Influence,
so
yeah.
I thought, then I would say, what if I were to improvise in that space? And then the terrifying thought was like, well, maybe you wouldn't even play anything. Why would you even play the cello? You maybe just, so there was that I was confronting. So that was the space, and I was like, okay, let me make the music that I would make if I could be in that tent and I had my cello and it's just the squirrels and the birds and maybe,
Mm.
a DPA and a Neumann there. What would that be like if I made music for myself like that? And that was what I wanted to do. So I worked really hard with myself psychologically, because a lot of this stuff is not technical. It's
Sure.
like what you're thinking. And I had the studio turned super dark, like no lights. It was like a bat cave. And I let the tape roll a long time, letting myself get into the space, not being worried about it, and knowing that I could edit it later. And I will say that I made that music, and that was that sort of like forest music. And in making that music, I kind of changed. And I got confused. The next time I played after that recording session, I was playing a solo set. I'm like, wait, am I playing for you, or are you just here to watch what I'm doing? Like, the whole thing had flipped until I was like, well, it's both. But I understood that up until that point, I was too focused on what the audience,
Yeah.
the experience was, and the judgment experience. I didn't have the personal, like, I'm making this meaning and this is what it is, whether you are in the forest or not to hear it, here's what's happening. So that kind of experience was really essential for me. And so once that was, well, you asked me about how I got free,
Yeah.
and I've been working towards that. But once that happened, that was a threshold.
Interesting. Yeah. No, it's so
So
important. Yeah.
since then, it's been, yep.
Yeah. Well, uh,
I like to work. I like to teach, not just for trying to break free and help them. A lot of things, there are technical pieces where the bow technique is, I know string players, it's emphasizing on smoothness, kind of, and like this dovetail
mhm.
thing. Crescendo diminuendo on everything. You don't get this. Things whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. So helping people find, you can make this other sound on your instrument that's like, bam, on a violin or viola or cello, and be able to have that. Because
Mhm.
rhythmically, what I learned was, oh, this is the other thing. I thought I was good at rhythm because I could play fancy string quartets and this and that and all this. I had terrible rhythm. I never had to lay down the bass line, and like I got my butt kicked by Harvey Sorgan, great drummer.
Yeah.
I had Joe Giardulo, and Harvey Sorgan, like, really, you don't, and learning a lot of the rhythm that I was used to doing was breathing and relative important. Same time also being a pocket.
Hmm.
And I didn't know about pocket really when I was a classical player. And seeing the richness of Bach, Beethoven, and nuance, but also have the things that will allow you to have options and freedom to improvise with people and not be held back by um, some stuff. So it's been and continues to be a process.
Interesting.
But I
Yeah.
mean, it's not, I think there were a lot of concerts and years where I would listen back or think back to what I played, and I would just feel so frustrated because of
Interesting.
feeling like I was bumping against the wall. So it just took a lot of persistence.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, then I listened to the record, you did with Gerald and Ingebrigt, and there's a lot of rhythm there.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
how did your story with Ingebrigt begin? And especially that record with Gerald. I mean, what's the story behind that one? I love that one, by the way. That's like a monster
Oh,
record.
wow, cool. Thanks. I was in Chicago. I used to go there every summer.
Mm.
My ex-wife was in a symphony there, and so she had a thing every summer. So I go out and I met the Chicago people, and I would just come out every summer and play, and it was great. Especially at that time, early 2000s,
Yeah,
umbrella
that
music
was.
was very active. And so you'd go to a show, and then they'd be like, okay, and then on Thursday go here, and on Friday go here. And like everything was all everyone was synergistic. It was amazing. So that was an amazing time to be there. And then I went to a show at Elastic. Ingebrigt was playing, maybe with John Arabigon even. Could have
Mm.
been. Was it? I don't know. Anyway, I played and I was like, holy crap, like this monster, Titanic, his energy and his sound and everything. So I went up to him and I said, oh, you want to get together sometime? And he was leaving soon, but we got together maybe the next day or something. We played and it was just really great, like
Mm.
brothers thing. And we did a session at his house and then played some like of my kind of quartet type tunes together and just did free improvisation. And then I had always admired Gerald's playing.
Mm.
And I thought I had been wanting to, again, for this idea of breaking free, I wanted to see, I set a challenge for myself. I was like, can I be like a tenor player? Because I didn't listen to cello players. I listened to tenor players. I'm like, I'm gonna try to be like that.
Mm.
And so a player who steps forward and it isn't, because I was working with like, oh, I'm playing, oh, now I'm gonna go back and behind the scenes. Like,
Yeah.
can I go out front and stay out front? And that was what I was working on, is can I be out front and stay out front, like a tenor player in a sax drums, bass.
Trio
So that
kind of,
was,
yeah.
that was the idea, and then I just wrote music for that, and then got those guys together, and we did a couple of concerts, and then did the record at Firehouse 12, and
Mm.
I wish and then Ingeborg and I played together quite a few more
Yeah,
times, and
yeah.
Gerald was on, but not for a while. Yeah,
Mm. Beautiful. Yeah.
I love his Gerald's playing on
Oh man,
all the time,
Gerald
but
is,
like,
yeah,
he's oh man,
yeah.
yeah,
We played together for quite some time. I mean, like in like those
oh yeah,
2005 to 2008, and
oh
man,
yeah,
for me that was like every gig was like, damn man, where did that come from? You know, like him and I played with him and A Bear a lot, like Johnny Bear on bass, and
oh yeah,
those two guys were
oh
like an elastic, like whoa,
oh
like you know, like
wow,
man, the time.
oh I'd like to hear that,
Yeah, I'll send you a link. We did like a really
please.
nice tour. Like,
Oh, I would love to hear that. I can only imagine. My experience of hearing him as in like from listening to him, not while playing with him, but is like him being both right there,
yeah,
totally present, and also like 1,000 miles above. Somehow he's kind of like this administrator of things, and he's right there. It's a really special mix.
yeah. It's funny that
Yeah.
you said this. I did this interview with Gerald, and he was talking about this actually. That I asked him how he's thinking when playing drums, and he said exactly this, that he's there, but he kind of tries to see this kind of go out to see a wider picture, kind of step
Interesting.
out of him. Interesting that you said that. Like,
Huh.
um,
Hmm.
Daniel, how did that story with Anthony Braxton also happen for you? That orchestra thing. You're on that one, right? I think so.
I was. I don't remember that much about it. I was in Connecticut,
Hmm.
and somebody asked me to do that, and I wish I had more interaction with Braxton,
So
because
you
I
didn't.
love his.
Okay. Yeah.
That was really it was just really, I was really just somebody who was sort of a couple rings out from the people who really worked with him, and they knew of me, and they thought, okay, he'll handle it and he'll do it. But it didn't. There wasn't more than that one time,
Ah, that
really.
was it only. Ah, okay. I thought you
Yeah,
worked
as
more
far
with him.
I don't think
Okay.
there was more than that. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Joe Morris, who showed me the Dortmund record live at Dortmund, and it was a 23J or something. George Lewis and all the,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's crazy stuff. Yeah. Those guys. I mean,
it is.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise, are you still writing music also? Composing or nowadays?
No,
No,
not,
also
I
not.
mean,
Oh,
sometimes I do as part of my practice,
yeah.
but I don't necessarily go out and play those things. Like I'll do it to sort of move ideas through and like and kind of help crystallize things. But what I'm really interested in is I'm just really interested in the process of um improvising without a plan at all and without material. That really interests me. And that's kind of that's been my focus. So I
Mm.
will write, but and then I'll practice a lot of things that I don't play. I'll practice a lot of like, I'll practice Bach a lot, and I don't play that out. I'll practice because I'm working on making my interface with the cello as seamless
Hmm.
and as possible. So I'm always, my teacher, the teacher I mentioned, Paul Tobias at Emmaus, he said, well, you can think about it this way, that you have a little stick and you're always kind of whittling it, and that you find that you pick it up, and oh, there's a little bit,
Oh yeah.
you just sharpen it every day, and it's just, you always find more stuff that you can, and it's a kind of an ongoing, like a practice. And so I just try to stay really current and humble with what's needed to be able to produce
Mm.
a pure, you know, this direct line between, and that's really what I'm focused on, is just producing music from that space. Kind of
Mm.
like what I said, like it's coming out of the tent and what's there.
Yeah.
So it's certainly possible that I may want to write music at some point and manifest it. But I'm still in this period for now, for sure,
Yeah.
of something else.
Yeah. Do you have some plans otherwise to record some of the solo stuff? I mean, do you have some
Yeah.
upcoming plans
Well,
of albums coming out, or what are the
well, yeah,
plans
a
there?
couple of things. So, there's a stuff. Well, geez. I'm really excited about this next record coming out on Hat Hut, which is with Say Miguel and Fala Mariam.
Mm.
And we did so about 12 years ago, I was in Lisbon and doing a solo concert. This was in the period before I had been in the tent, come out of the tent. I was like, I'd made my first solo record, but I was still like, I was like a boxer in the ring, but I was getting knocked down a lot, with the solo music. Anyways, at ZDB in Lisbon, and I played this concert. And I was like, working real hard, I was doing it, I was doing my thing. And then this guy comes up to me who I don't know, comes up and he's like, puts his hand on my shoulder. You don't have to play so many notes. It's like, oh man, and it's Say Miguel. I'm like, of course he was right. Of course he was right because he could see. I was like, yeah, I know. Yeah. Anyway, that was our meeting, and then it was like about 2 years ago. I hadn't been to Portugal in a long time, but I came back and I was doing some stuff. And then I was with this poet, and we were like, "What are we going to do?" Because we did this show, and she said, "Oh, well, I think San Miguel's playing." So, let's go check it out. So we go over to where he's playing, and it's his art gallery. And I got my cello on my back, and he comes out of the venue before the gig, and he goes, "Is it you?" I said, "Yes, yes, it's me." And then I remind him of the story about like the too many notes. He says, so tonight you've come to get your revenge, he says. He's awesome. So I check out the show, and he asked me, did I play too many notes? Did I play too many notes? No, I didn't. And then he shows up the next night. I had a gig in Parede with Hernani Faustino and Rodrigo Pinheiro, the pianist. And we had this trio gig, and he came out with Falamariam, and he came up, and he was very complimentary after the gig. And he's like, you didn't play one too many notes tonight. It was great. So that was like really a big deal because that was consistent with what I felt about my evolution, which was that I was playing too many notes or doing too much, and then it got to a point of clarity with my playing where it was more focused, and he was an important witness to that. And it was meaningful for me to have him connect those places because I was a different musician now than then. And after that, we talked about let's do something. And so I came back to Lisbon, and we did a duo concert at ZDB, the same place. And it was so beautiful to play with him. And he did a solo, and I did a solo, and we did a duo. And it just felt exceptional. And we got it recorded. And then I came back again, and we did a studio session with Fala Mariam, his partner on trombone, and made a really nice record. And it's called Panorama. It's coming out on June 3rd.
Oh, fantastic.
June 3rd on Hat Hut. And I'm really proud of it. And it's very patient music. And there's that. There's a duo record with a Turkish pianist named İpek Egenli. And she is based in Atlanta now, and she's really interesting. And that's coming out on Ears and Eyes Records later in June. And then as far as what you said about the solo music, I was another recording more recently from Portugal. It's funny. It was me and then the International Improvising Unit, which was like Fred Lomberg home, right? And some other like Portuguese guys mostly. And it was funny, we were having dinner before the show. And I was talking to Fred. He was like, yeah, well, I hadn't seen him for a while. Anyways, he's another cello player. And like, we're friends, but it's also like, he's another cello player, and he's like, well, how long is your set? And I'm like, well, I don't know, like 35 or 40 minutes. He's like, oh, short. Like, oh, solo music, it's rich. It's like ruffles.
Sure.
But he's like, oh, it's kind of oh, yeah. So anyway, I was thinking, all right, let me see what I could do tonight. Let me see if I can go past that, because I always played like 35 or 40 minutes for a solo set.
Sure.
Because who wants to hear cello for longer than that solo? But I was like, listen, let me just do this because I felt like there was an opportunity. So I played a 50-minute set, And I really pushed through, and it was really great because I was committed from the whole night through. And it was recorded very well by the same guy who recorded the duo with San Miguel at ZDB. He was there at Schmoop, and that looks like that's going to be coming out. I'm not sure when.
Fantastic.
And that's not the kind of record. That's not the kind of record that I made with San Miguel, because he's old school, and he's like, I believe a record should be tight like a drum, he says. And he goes through everything and cuts and edits, and
Wow.
it's a beautiful thing. Like, the post-production for him is the making of the record. And I don't usually do it that way, but I learned a lot from him. But that's not what this solo thing is. This is saying, I played a long set. This is a document.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to care if it's good or not. I was committed all the way through. I know this is real. Let's put this out. This is what it is. So that's the kind of record it is. And so
Fantastic.
I'm just starting to shop it around.
Fantastic. Wow, super, man. I'm looking forward to new music. Yay.
Yay.
Fantastic. Beautiful. Yeah. Cool. Otherwise, if you're going to be in Europe, drop me a line. Let me know, come over to
Oh,
Slovenia
yeah.
or something. We should get together and play or whatever.
I would like that. Let's do that. Let's definitely do that.
If you're going to
Some
be
coffee.
around, let me know.
Wine.
We have some nice wine. I'm in the wine region, so.
Oh, okay. All right. I have Bourbonade here, so.
Oh, God. Okay. So,
No
kind of.
Bourbonade. It's A&W root beer with wild turkey. Excellent drink. Yeah.
There you go. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Daniel, I think we covered so much, a lot, so it was beautiful to hear
Yeah.
you talk about some things. So, and I'm excited about the new records. I really check them out. So beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. It's really a pleasure to talk with you, and I am glad I finally met you, because I feel like this isn't the end.
Dr. Jazz.